Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Entrepreneur, and Susan Fowler is a problem Uber cannot get away from. She is a problem for them, not for people like me. I like people like Susan. She makes my job very, very fun, and she exposes things that Uber does not want you to know. She's the one who wrote that article, My Very Strange Year at Uber, where she detailed the sexual harassment problems in the company, the culture problems, and it started the events that got rid of Travis Kalanick. Although I've come to the conclusion that Dara K might be a little bit worse, unfortunately, but you know what? She was a vessel for getting things changed, and you know what? She is very well respected by a lot of people, including me. And she's even more respected this morning. Like, I even sent her an email. She'll probably not respond because she gets a lot of emails, but I thanked her for what she was doing because she is actually doing us, the drivers, a huge, huge favor by going to bat for us by, throwing her support behind, a legislation bill in California, which is where Uber and Lyft are headquartered, by the way. So is Grubhub, I believe, and Postmates and DoorDash. I think a lot of them are, located in California. That would put an end to forced arbitration. And what the forced arbitration is, when you accept the terms of service, if you have a grievance with the company, you can't take them to court. It has to be put into arbitration. Like, it's done outside of the public. The laundry doesn't go out there. You deal with it privately. And of course, if anyone's ever dealt with a company privately when it comes to grievances, you'll know how that works out, especially if you've done it with Uber. But according to TechCrunch, Susan Fowler, the former Uber engineer whose blog posts about sexual harassment and troubling internal workings led to the departure of CEO Travis Kalanick, is backing new legislation that aims to give victims of sexual harassment and other workplace discrimination the freedom to seek legal action and do it publicly. Fowler is lending her support to Bill AB 3080, proposed by California Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, the California Labor Federation, and the Economic Policy Institute, which would forbid employers from the practice of forced arbitration in response to discrimination complaints. Now, what should be noted here, it says discrimination complaints. I would like to see forced arbitration come to an end for everything. You have a problem, you should be able to speak about it publicly. That sometimes is the only way people learn their lesson or behave. Because here's the thing, just getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's say this thing forces discrimination complaints into arbitration. Okay, you might see less discrimination, but what about sexual harassment? What if this doesn't cover sexual harassment or wages? Well, those could still be sent to arbitration. Arbitration is just not good for anyone but the company, and I fully believe if you have a grievance, you should be able to air it freely and openly. Let's continue. The proposed legislation tackles a worrying norm in which companies, including throughout tech, mandate that employees air any grievances before a private third-party arbiter who is typically paid for by the company itself. So obviously, it's going to be mutual. It's not going to be by. I can't get through that sentence. I just cannot get through that sentence. Of course, it's going to be biased against the employee. The employer pays the bills. I mean, that's just how it always works, even in a small scale, like the Motion Picture Association of America. Have you ever noticed that the independent films get much higher ratings for much less content compared to the studio films? Because who pays the bills? The studios. So of course they're going to get the more favorable ratings. The hearings happen in secret, with non-disclosure clauses preventing the claimant from talking about the details or filing a class action lawsuit. Again, how does this benefit the employers? It doesn't. It only benefits the employees. And they are on the rise. The percentage of non-union private sector employees covered by mandatory arbitration clauses has more than doubled since the early 2000s, according to a study last year by the Economic Policy Institute, a think tank in Washington, D.C. And why wouldn't they rise? Why wouldn't they? Seriously. Keeps your dirty laundry out of the public, and you can deal with people in a way that favors you, the company. Though the issue has come up periodically in Silicon Valley, venture firm Kleiner Perkins tried forcing former employee Ellen Pao into arbitration when she sued the firm for gender discrimination. Oh, wow, Ellen Pao. That's not a name I've heard in a while. I think we talked about her in a few videos. It hasn't received widespread attention, quote, for the same reason that it hasn't gotten much attention from people who work in other industries, says Fowler via email. They don't realize it affects them, and they don't realize how widespread and sinister the problem really is. Although I acknowledge that it's a big problem, I have spoken about this problem. Heck, every time Uber gets sued, there's always a big debate. Will it go into arbitration or not? Will it go into arbitration? And that is, by the way, why the Waymo and Google lawsuit was so important. Uber tried to put it into arbitration, and when it didn't work and the trial actually started, Uber was very quick to settle. Fowler says that she was, quote, one of those people for most of her life, knowing nothing about forced arbitration until she experienced what she described as illegal treatment on Uber, after which she said she discovered that she, quote, had no way to get justice, and that's just how the companies like it. Now that she knows about forced arbitration, she says, quote, I'm hell-bent on bringing attention to it and doing everything I can to prevent what happened to me at Uber from happening to anyone else. And I hope she is successful in that. Heck, I do, how many videos do I do? I do hundreds of videos a year about how terribly people are treated at Uber. I would so love it if one piece of legislation could cut that down to even a tenth of what it is now. The proposed legislation isn't the first of its kind. A 2015 bill banning mandatory arbitration agreements as a condition of employment wended its way all the way to California Governor Jerry Brown's desk. Faced with stiff opposition from the California Chambers of Commerce, which labeled it a job killer, Brown vetoed the bill. You're an idiot! Seriously, when people say, sometimes people come to me and say, hey Kevin, why doesn't President Trump scare you? How come you don't stay up at night? You know why Donald Trump doesn't scare me? Because I have Governor Jerry Brown as a governor. This guy does not hesitate to use executive power to do very terrible things to the people and to businesses, and yet one of the few pieces of legislation that would actually help the very employees that he totally goes against, he vetoes it. God, he's an idiot. Caitlin Vega, legislative director of the California Labor Federation, an organization that works with 1,200 labor unions across the state, is hoping the timing is better for AB 3080, given the hashtag #MeToo movement and the awareness it has raised around sexual discrimination and harassment in particular. Yeah, again, though, we need to bring an end to forced arbitration overall, not just for a few things. Vega also says the bill differs from its predecessor in ways that may make it more palatable to Governor Brown. For example, gone is language that required that any waiver of any legal right by an employee must be knowing and voluntary in writing and may not be an expression condition of employment. This time the focus is more narrowly on ensuring that people not be forced to agree to potential arbitration as a condition of their employment, that employers be prohibited from, quote, threatening, retaliate, or discriminating against or terminating any applicant for employment or prospective employment or any employee because of the refusal to consent to the waiver of any right, form, or procedure for a violation of specific statutes covered. Wow. Well, that's positive, of course. Let's see here. Either way, proponents, including Fowler, hope far more attention will be paid to the bill's benefits instead of the perceived benefits to corporations in continuing to use arbitration agreements widely. Quote, the dominant view is that it helps manage long-term legal risk, ensuring that the companies won't become embroiled in costly, drawn-out lawsuits. Fowler wrote in a recent op-ed for the New York Times. I need to read this article. She's so good. She's the kind of... She writes the articles I would love to write, but I'm not as good of a writer. Yet the examples of Uber and IBM show that the opposite is true. Forced arbitration leads to long-term operating risk. Forcing legal disputes about discrimination, harassment, or retaliation to go through secret arbitration proceeds hides the behavior and allows it to become culturally entrenched, she added. Fowler has said that she believes instead of a choice between optional arbitration and a public lawsuit would be the ideal solution for dealing with discrimination. I can see that. That was the case for her time at Uber, which had a clause in her employment contract that prevented her from going public with what had happened. The company did take steps after Fowler went public with her story, including hiring Eric Holder to conduct a company-wide investigation, which Uber said included firing people. Kalanick also later resigned after a wave of controversies made his position untenable. By then, however, the company's reputation to outsiders was shattered, and continues to be shattered. And yet, it still won't be shattered enough to get the drivers good pay. Fowler is determined to bring about change. Last year, she filed an amicus briefing in 3 high court cases, asking the Supreme Court to consider that class and collective action bans and workplace arbitration agreements violate federal labor laws, which I believe they do. She appears to be far from done with this issue, too. Quote, arbitration agreements are present in nearly every employment agreement, she tells TechCrunch. If you have a job, chances are you've unwittingly signed away your constitutional right to sue your employer if you ever experience illegal treatment like harassment, retaliation, and discrimination. You probably didn't realize that you signed away this right because the language used in forced arbitration agreements is thick with legalists so heavy you need a law degree to understand what it all means. Most important to know, she says, given the near ubiquity of arbitration agreements right now, quote, you probably signed away your right to sue before you even started your job. And that is a huge, huge problem because you know what? I don't care how badly you need a job. You are not guaranteed that that job is going to go smoothly. You are not guaranteed you're going to be treated right. You are not going to be guaranteed that you're going to be treated legally. And if they do something illegal, you need to be able to sue them. I thankfully was able to sue one of my previous employers and I won. But if I work for them today, I have been told through people who actually still work there for some reason that, hey, you know what? They've actually introduced arbitration into the employee contracts and they even made all the current employees sign it. So those illegal things that they were doing to me, and they can now officially do them and not be sued for them. Yeah. This one's a long one, I'm sorry. The new legislation is being announced formally today, Wednesday, which this is Thursday, I believe, when this video goes up. After a period of public review, it will then head into committee hearings. If all goes as its supporters hope, the bill will then go to Assembly floor, then the Senate floor before heading to idiot Governor Brown by the late summer. I added the idiot part myself. And we end on a tweet by Susan Fowler saying, sometimes when I tell people this, they laugh because it sounds impossible. And then I tell them that, no, I'm serious. This is the hill I am willing to die on. So, Susan, once again, thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing. And there are so many people that are going to benefit from this if it goes through. And, you know, so many tech companies get their start in California that this would have widespread implications. Now, some people might say that this might force some companies to leave the state. And you know what? It might. I mean, I know Carl's Jr. is already moving to Texas. Not related to this, but they are. I wouldn't be surprised if Uber and Lyft moved to another, state. I don't know if they could force arbitration from the other state. Obviously, this doesn't cover Amazon. But it would be a good first step. And if they could get it rolling, maybe other states. It's just crazy to me that there is a clause that you can make people sign before they even have worked that says you will not sue us. You know that we will treat you right and you will not sue us. That is the most ridiculous thing, or one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. So, yeah, it's going to be a long fight, and maybe Governor Brown, who has signed a lot of legislation that truly does hurt business, and this would not have been one of them, hopefully he'll sign it. I hope. In the meantime, what do you folks think? Do you think it's possible? What do you think of arbitration? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. If you enjoyed the videos I make, consider becoming a Patreon member for $1 a month. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.